Hello everyone, and welcome back to the finals of the 1971 candidate series. It's Tigran Petrosian again against Bobby Fischer. This is game 8, and if you've been following the series so far, Fischer won game 1, Petrosian quickly retaliated in game 2 with the white pieces, then 3 games were drawn, and then Fischer won 2 games in a row. So even though if you check out only the first 5 games, it seems like Petrosian was in the lead in pretty much all of them except that quick draw. But then even in game 6 he chose a very passive approach, that ready opening, which Fischer took very nicely advantage of and managed to win that game. And then again game 7, truly a brilliant positional masterpiece by Bobby Fischer. Then this brings us to game 8. Now Petrosian is down 2 points in the match, and now he can't afford, pretty much can't afford any more draws. He just has to get back into this match. So what did he prepare for this game? For this game, Petrosian opens with d4. To get in the mood, here is the photo of this matchup. As you can see, Petrosian again posing, as we've already seen in the previous video. There you have it, and Fischer to this d4 move, of course, as usual, replies with knight to f6. We have c4, e6, knight to f6, and the d5 here. We transpose into the queen's gambit declined. Knight to c3, and now c5, this very nice Tarrasch setup. We have e3, and again Petrosian chooses this sort of a tame opening line with e3, and again Fischer will take advantage of this very nicely, as you'll see. Knight to c6, we have a3, and now knight to e4, and here queen to c2. Petrosian doesn't want to exchange in the center with c captures on d5. Usually this will be a theme in many openings. It's often he who trades first is pretty much giving advantage to the other player, as it is often said in chess, to take is a mistake. If you're not really gaining anything by capturing, just don't capture. So okay, Petrosian decides to keep the tension in the center going. We have knight captures on c3, b captures on c3, and bishop to e7. Bishop to b2. We have castles, and now bishop to d3. So if you look at this dark square bishop here, it's not really an excellent bishop just yet. It's pretty much like a pawn. So again, Petrosian chooses a very passive opening, and he has to do something about this. h6, as the h7 pawn was under attack. We have castles, and now knight to a5, pressuring the c4 pawn. And again, Petrosian is reluctant to capture on d5. Instead, he defends the pawn, knight to d2. We have c captures on d captures on c4, knight captures on c4, knight captures on c4, bishop captures on c4, and now b6. Fischer prepares to develop his light square bishop and pressure the white king. We have e4, bishop to b7, and now queen to e2, guarding the e2 pawn from here. It would be very dangerous to play a move something like e5, as danger lurks in the position. Here b5 would be an excellent move. For example, bishop captures, and now queen d5. A simple idea, threatening checkmate, but as white has to deal with this, you will simply win a piece here. So okay, queen to e2. We have rook to c8, x-raying that bishop on c4. We have bishop to b3, and now b5. A very nice move, which prevents the immediate d5 because of c4. With c4, you would pretty much cement this bishop to behave like a pawn for the rest of the game. After bishop to c2, you can capture on d5, and now after rook after d1, rook e8, and black would be better here. So after b5, Petrosian goes f4. We have queen to b6, and now king to h1. Simply getting the king out of the way, as the queen was eyeing him. C captures on d4, c captures on d4, and now b4. Again, a very nice move. Fischer could have prepared it with a5, but he doesn't think it's necessary. By playing b4, he's now threatening bishop to a6 to win the exchange here. But okay, a captures on b4, simply grabbing a pawn. Now rook and queen guard the a6 square, so bishop to a6 is no longer possible. Bishop captures on b4 was played. If you try something like queen captures on b4 with an attack on the bishop, simply rook to f3, defends the bishop, and also it's a nice rook lift. So this only favors white. So after a captures on b4, bishop captures on b4, and now we have d5. Bishop to c3 by Fischer, bishop captures, rook captures, and now you have to do something with the bishop. And this is pretty much, well, we could say the more important moment in the game, because here if Petrosyan was not down by 2 points in the match, he would most likely play bishop to a2, and then let's say bishop to a6 attacks the queen and the rook. We have queen moves with an attack on the rook, rook to d3 now attacking the queen, and now queen to f2 offering a trade of queens. Captures on d5, bishop captures, rook captures, opening up an attack against the rook on f1. Queen captures, pawn captures, and now after rook captures on a6, rook to b5, and we would have a completely equal position material-wise on the board, 2 rooks and 4 pawns each, where Fischer would have a passed pawn on the queen side, but pretty much a drawn endgame. And most likely this is what Petrosyan would have gone for if he was not already down in this match. But as a draw with the white pieces doesn't really suit him, he goes bishop to c2 and decides to sacrifice a pawn. So okay, e captures on d5, Fischer accepts the pawn sacrifice, and now comes e5. So okay, you did give up a pawn, but what do you get in exchange? Fischer plays rook to e3 with an attack on the queen. Of course he wants to push the d pawn, but if you push d4 immediately, you can get blocked with bishop to d3, and then this queen bishop battery will be a very nice blockade against the d4 pawn. So first rook to e3, attacking Petrosyan's queen. We have queen to d2, and only now d4. Now bishop to d3 isn't all that impressive, simply queen to c6, you're threatening checkmate here, well, first capturing the bishop and then delivering checkmate, so this bishop would now pretty much only serve as a target. So after d4, rook a to b1, attacking Fischer's queen. We have queen to a6, eyeing that rook on f1, rook to f2, getting out of the way, and also introducing another defender of the g2 pawn. We have rook to d8 by Fischer, and now comes king to g1. A very important move, as Petrosyan's back rank is very vulnerable. For example, if you try something like rook to d1 with ideas of capturing here, black doesn't really care, simply bishop to e4. And now even if you try to give up the queen for all this material, it doesn't really help you. D captures, rook captures with check. King moves, you even capture the bishop with check, g6, and even though you have 2 rooks and a bishop for the queen, you're lost. Your rook is under attack. You can't really move the rook away from the f-file, because queen to f1 will result in checkmate. And of course you can't allow black to capture your rook. So if you play something like rook to f3, again you will face queen to a1 check, and now after you give up all the material, rook d1 check, queen captures rook f1, you will still be given queen to f1 checkmate. So after rook to d8, we have king to g1, kind of trying to make the back rank a bit more or less vulnerable. Bishop to e4, attacking the bishop, bishop captures, rook captures, and now h3, Petrosyan makes some breathing space for the king. d3, of course you have to push your passed pawn. Rook to b3, introducing another attacker into the game. Queen to c4, attacking the rook, rook goes back, and now rook d to d4, with a triple attack against the f4 pawn. Petrosyan defends it, g3, and now rook to d5. Fischer now wants to either trade off one of the rooks or gain control of the b file. King to h2 by Petrosyan, and now rook to b5. Here, if you trade rook captures, queen captures, so white's still pretty much caught up defending against this d3 pawn, and Fischer can simply start pushing his a pawn, so white has nothing to look for here. So after rook to b5, Tigran tries rook to a2, getting the rook out of the way, and also perhaps attacking the a7 pawn. But Fischer ignores it. The a7 pawn is no longer important, as Fischer now gained control of the b file. Rook to b1 by Fischer, and now comes g4. There really isn't time to capture here, because here rook to e2 would have been enough to win this game. You have to capture, otherwise you're going to lose the rook if you move the queen. So rook captures, pawn captures, and now whatever you do, even this check doesn't really do anything. King h7, white has no means of continuing his attack, and black will simply bring another queen into the game and checkmate white king. Okay, rook to b1, g4 now by Petrosian, and now we have rook to e2 all the same. Rook to e2 capturing, d captures on e2, and now queen captures on e2. Here, for a brief moment, Petrosian manages to, regain the material balance on the board, but it's far too late. Queen captures on f4 with check. We have king to g2. This is move 40 by Petrosian, so time control has been reached. And for Fischer's 40th move, he plays rook to b3. And here, in this position, Tigran Petrosian resigned the game. So yeah. Why did he resign? Well, there are simply too many threats here. For example, you can pause the video. For example, if Petrosian would play queen to f2 offer a queen trade, you can try and figure out how black wins here. So pause the video here and try to find any sequence of moves that are sufficient to win for black. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, you are an excellent game finisher. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, well, for example, queen to e4 check. Now, as the queen moved from the defense of this pawn, you will simply check the king, and now if king to h2, you simply grab the e5 pawn, and if, for example, king to g1, then rook to b1 check is coming. King h2, now you can even give queen to h1 check, king moves, rook to b3 check, king moves, g5 check, as the queen is controlling this diagonal. You have to go up with the king, and now you play queen to c6, and there is no defense against queen to g6 checkmate. Or if you push e6, then okay, queen to e6 will be checkmate, but it's checkmate just the same, as f4 is guarded here. So Petrosian isn't interested in exploring all of these fancy lines, so after rook to b3 he decided to resign the game. So this is game number 8 of the 1971 candidates match, Bobby Fischer versus Tigran Petrosian. Fischer now won his 3rd game in a row, and he's now leading this match by 3 points. So now if he gains 1 more point, then the match will be over, as now the result is 5.5 to 2.5 in Fischer's favor. So if he touches 6.5, the match is over. But yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it and that you're enjoying the Fischer series so far. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you soon, hopefully with another interesting video, and then, some more interesting content, hopefully. Thank you all, and I'll see you soon.